Hey everybody, it's James here from goodguitarist.com, and today I just have a few words of advice on making clearer chord shapes. We're going to go over 4 things that you can do that'll help you troubleshoot your chords if, say, the strings are buzzing or you can't quite do it the right way. For these examples, I'm going to be using the C chord, which is one of the more difficult ones for beginning guitar players. First of all, if you're not familiar with that shape, we'll start out by skip the first string. We're going to put our index finger on the first fret of the second string, that's the B string. Then we skip a string, and then on the D string, which if we count from the thinnest string, 1, 2, 3, 4, that's the 4th one, we're going to put our middle finger down on that one, and then we're going to put our ring finger on the 3rd fret of the A string, and we'll ignore the thickest string. So we have 4 things that I want to talk about. The first one is finger placement. You can place your finger anywhere within this box, and it should technically work. But the thing is, if I move my finger towards this side, even though I'm applying the same amount of pressure, it's not working. You know, you get way more leverage when your finger is as close to the fret as possible. So if you're having trouble with any of your chord shapes, the first thing you should do is make sure that your fingers are as close to the fret as possible. The second thing is having arched fingers. You want your fingers to be arched like that. You don't want them to kind of fall flat, because when they're flat, they'll touch the strings beside them and they won't ring out, right? So you want to arch them. And if you're having trouble arching your fingers, chances are your thumb is in the wrong place. And that's the third thing we need to check, is our thumb placement. With every chord ever, your thumb should be behind your fingers. So in this case, with the C chord, just take a look at the edges of our chord shape, right there and right there. We want our thumb to be about halfway between them. And you can see that my thumb is about halfway between, and that way it balances out the shape. And you also don't want your thumb too low or too high. Depends on the chord shape, but generally you want it around the middle. You know, start there. You want your thumb pointing directly up. You don't want it off to the side like that or in some weird way, because that just adds tension to your wrist. So we have our thumb a bit lower, and that'll help you arch your fingers. So far we have finger placement, putting them as close to the fret as possible. Then we have arching your fingers, and we have your thumb placement, which is tied in to arching your fingers. You know, if your thumb's a bit lower, you can arch your fingers a bit better, and you'll find what's comfortable. But basically your thumb is countering all the pressure that your fingers are putting on the front. You know, your thumb is doing just as much work as all 3 of these fingers combined. So you really want to get it in a comfortable place. And another really big piece of advice is don't let your guitar neck sink. You always want it to be a little bit upright. Now, the last thing that we can check, if all else fails, is finger pressure. Just pressing a little bit harder. You know, and I know that's really obvious, but sometimes you have to do that. And it's not necessarily about your finger strength. Something that helps you push a lot harder is having calluses. You know, maybe this is your first or second day playing guitar and you haven't developed your calluses yet, and you're wondering, why isn't this C chord working out? Well, once your fingers have hardened up a little bit, it'll be so much easier to press down the string. You know, I just want you to imagine like pressing a button using a wooden block, and then trying to press that same button using a super soft foam block. You know, the wood block will just transfer the energy directly into the switch, whereas the really soft thing, you'll have to really press hard because, you know, it has some give in it. And the same thing's going to happen with your fingers. Once they've hardened up, you won't have to press so hard. And another thing that having calluses does is when you press a string, it kind of pushes the excess flesh under your finger away from the strings. You know, so just take a look here. Imagine that's a string. See how underneath my finger right there? See how like the skin moves out of the way? That's because this whole area here is hardened. So when I press on the front of it, it pushes on this and pushes it back. So it might just be a matter of developing those calluses, and that'll help you put more pressure. It'll get the flesh or the fat under your fingers pushed out of the way so that it doesn't mute the adjacent strings, and you'll be just pressing the part of the guitar that you want to press. Now, I have all these steps available in my free ebook. There's a link to that down below. It's 100% free, and it goes over all 4 of these. Just to review, we have our finger placement, putting it close to the fret. We have arched fingers. We have our thumb placement, making sure it's not too high or too low, pointing upward. And then finger pressure, which kind of ties into having calluses. And whenever you're having trouble with a chord shape, I want you to think about those 4 things, and you can print it off from my free ebook. There's a printable page in there that can help remind you of that. Otherwise, have a fun time practicing. If you need any other help, I have my complete beginners course, my free ebook, like I just mentioned, a few other things. I'll put links to all that stuff down below. But ultimately, at this phase of guitar, if you're trying to clear up your chord shapes, stick with a few chords and work on them a lot before you move on. It's about quality over quantity. Anyways, have a fun time practicing, and I'll see you soon.